what really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Monday, April 16th, 2018, start of a brand new week. We have got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Obviously, the big story, and a lot of people are just angry about this, is that Friday night, Donald Trump unleashed a massive missile attack on Syria to supposedly punish them for the as yet unproven chemical weapon attack in Douma. And they launched 105 weapons, including Tomahawk cruise missiles, air-to-ground missiles, a bunch of other stuff, just poured it on in there against 5 targets. And the tough talk is continuing. Trump is out there saying that we're locked and loaded for more strikes on Syria. Hang on a second. Got to leave a little message to my control room guy. He's out there talking about we're going to strike Syria again if there's another chemical attack, which is telegraphing there will be more false flags. And we have about 4,000 troops exercising, doing war games on the border with Syria right now. Looks to me like they're practicing for a ground invasion. The war party does not want to give up on Syria. Israel does not want to give up on the U.S. Conquering Syria because Israel wants the Golan. The Golan is still technically Syrian territory. It's occupied by Israel, and Israel is already selling the oil and gas from underneath the Golan. They don't want to give that up. They don't want to give the money back. So they want Syria destroyed so that they can complete their theft of all that oil and gas. So everybody's saying, you know, what was going on here? What prompted it? A lot of observers were thinking that the U.S. might wait until the Harry S. Truman was able to get into the Mediterranean, which is still a few days away. But it turns out the attack into Syria happened just one day before the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons was getting ready to start their work in Douma. In fact, when the attack started, a lot of these chemical weapons experts were concerned Douma itself might be targeted to just get rid of all the evidence. And it wasn't hit, which doesn't mean it wasn't targeted. More about that a little bit later. But Vladimir Putin is already out there pointing out that the U.S., supported by France and Britain, has launched this airstrike against military and civilian targets in the Syrian Arab Republic. It is an act of aggression against a sovereign state on the front line of the fight against terrorism, and it was committed without a mandate from the UN Security Council and in violation of the UN Charter and the norms and principles of international law. And then he pointed out that just a year ago, there was a cruise missile attack on the Shayrat Air Base, and the U.S. Used as a pretext a staged chemical attack against civilians. Now, so far, nobody in Douma has been able to confirm a chemical attack had actually taken place. There are no traces of toxic agents, no signs of any chemical weapons victims in any of the hospitals. The doctors and nurses are saying no, they haven't seen anybody. And the word in the area is the whole thing was a hoax put together by the White Helmets. And the U.S. just went on that. Now, Mike Pence is out there calling the Syria mission completely accomplished. That's his first lie. And then he says Russia needs to get the message on how tough we are and how impossible it would be to beat the United States. Well, again, not so sure. 105 weapons were launched, standoff missiles, Tomahawks, and so forth. 70 of them were shot down. They didn't reach their targets. I'm sure they came down somewhere, and they probably killed a lot more people than supposedly died at Douma. And here's the important part. The U.S. stayed away from Russian-occupied territory, so there was no conflict between the U.S. and Russia. The Syrians are using these older systems, like the Buk missile. This is 30-year-old Soviet era anti-aircraft systems, and they brought down all of these cruise missiles. And by the way, one of them was the first deployment of the U.S. new stealth cruise missile. We don't know if that one was intercepted or not. But that's a worse kill ratio than happened a year ago at the airfield. So much for Trump's tweet about they're coming fast and smart. They got taken out by this 30-year-old technology. So 100 missiles for 5 buildings. Most of them actually focused on just one. We'll be talking about that in a little bit. Meanwhile, the Syrian army has declared the full recapture of eastern Ghouta. There was apparently one coordinated attack by the militants to try and seize territory around Damascus. It failed miserably. All right, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just rejoining the network. We're talking about this war crime committed by the U.S. government in Syria over the weekend. Now, Nikki Haley is up at the UN, just flapping her gums again and saying there will be no diplomatic talks with Syria's Assad, and the U.S. troops are staying in Syria until our goals are met. Without saying exactly what those goals are, obviously it's got nothing to do with ISIS and Al-Qaeda anymore because they're already gone. And Nikki Haley, once again, is telegraphing a false flag right here in the United States. If we don't deal with Assad, there'll be a chemical attack in the U.S. They're really ramping this situation up. Now, John Bolton, who's Trump's Israel First neocon advisor, coordinated the U.S. strike on Syria with Israel. And there are reports that immediately following the attack, Israel went on in and bombed some more stuff again. Now, France and Britain nominally were part of this coalition. Everybody else stayed out. And they're all trying to take credit for it. Over in France, Macron is saying that he was the one who steered Trump on the strikes and said, here's where you should go. And Theresa May is out there reassuring Parliament that the Syrian airstrikes were in Great Britain's interest, again, without defining what the interest is. Now, only a quarter of Britons backed Theresa May's decision to launch a military attack on Syria, and that prompted George Galloway to come on out and say that no war in history has been started with so little support. Meanwhile, Germany's president is moving over toward Russia. Frank-Walter Steinmeier is saying it's time to end the demonization of Russia and its people and go back to being friends. So that is falling apart. And I know we got a lot of callers on the line, but I want to get through all of this stuff before I start taking phone calls. Meanwhile, Russian reinforcements are heading for Syria. 2 warships laden with military vehicles have been spotted en route to Syria after Friday's U.S.-led airstrikes obliterated, my mistake, what are still being claimed to be suspected chemical weapons sites. Now, undeterred by the attack, the chemical inspectors are already at work in Syria's Douma, and they're not finding anything. There's no trace of sarin or chlorine or any other toxic material. And they can't find any witnesses to a chemical weapon attack. They can't find anybody at the hospital who treated anybody with a chemical weapons injury. The latest story is there was an ordinary everyday fire, and those children were being treated for smoke inhalation. And somebody said, oh, we can use this. It's a gas attack. Let's just go for that here. Now, Russia's envoy to the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons is out there saying they have incontrovertible proof that this attack in Syria is just made up. It's a video shot by the White Helmets. They're saying British intelligence was involved, was completely staged. And here is how we know they're telling the truth. Because there's no evidence. They couldn't find any evidence whatsoever. So they went on in and they bombed a whole bunch of places, including this Barza Development of Pharmaceutical and Chemical Industries. Now, oddly enough, this company is owned by NTI, which is located in Washington, D.C. And its advisors, if you look on the website, include Warren Buffett, David Hamburg, and Siegfried Hecker. And if you look at the board of directors, Sam Nunn, Ted Turner, and it just goes on and on. So you're wondering what's happening. Now, this building, this Barza Development of Pharmaceutical and Chemical Industries, and by the way, the OPCW went there in 2013, gave it a clean bill of health. Now, the corporate media is saying this is a place where chemical weapons were stored and being loaded into artillery shells. And no chemical weapon artillery shell has been used anywhere in Syria. They're always improvised devices, and the evidence is always found in the bases of the U.S.-backed terrorists there. Now, because of sanctions against Syria, U.S. companies cannot sell cancer medication to the country. And so this Barza facility was making cancer medication. Apparently, they've discovered 3 new cancer medications. That's what they were doing. This is a complete replay of when Bill Clinton bombed an aspirin factory in Sudan to distract the media from Monica Lewinsky. It's a complete replay, and I hope the owners of this facility sue the U.S. government for wrongful destruction of their property. So, Paul Craig Roberts has come out with an interesting observation, and it's one that Claire and I were talking about over the weekend. Okay, the U.S. is claiming that all these facilities that were bombed were storing chemical weapons or loading them on to artillery shells. They targeted that Barza facility with like 70 of the missiles. We don't know how many actually hit, but they pulverized the place. Here's the issue. If you bomb a chemical weapon depot, chemical weapon factory, or someplace where chemical weapons are being loaded into artillery shells, you're going to release a huge toxic cloud that is going to spread out from the building and kill and injure thousands and thousands of people. No reports of it whatsoever. No reports at all. In fact, at the Barza facility, the international media has already been toured through the place. And the guy who was leading the mayor said, the fact that you're all still standing here alive shows there were no chemical weapons here. Because otherwise, had there been chemical weapons here, we'd all have to be in those protective suits or we would be dead. So, it's amazing. Now, here's where the lies really pile on up. Earlier I said that the suspected chemical weapon attack site in Douma was not hit in the attack, despite the fears of the OPCW scientists. But it may have been targeted. And it may have been targeted with some of the missiles that were successfully shot down by the Syrian army. And so that leaves the U.S. with a tremendous embarrassing situation. The OPCW isn't finding anything. The Russian chemical weapons experts aren't finding anything. Nobody can find any witnesses to a chemical weapon attack. Nobody can find any people injured in a chemical weapons attack. So what does the U.S. do if they can't actually blow the site up and render it impossible to investigate? They start another lie. And believe it or not, the United States is now claiming that Moscow may have tampered with the site just to make us look really, really bad. And apparently at a closed-door meeting of the OPCW group, the U.S. representative literally came on out and said, well, we're pretty sure that the absence of any evidence of a chemical weapons attack in Douma is proof that Moscow has cleaned up the site. Now, think about how long it took to clean up the Gulf oil disaster. Think about the fact they still haven't cleaned up Fukushima or Hanford. Cleaning up all traces of chemical weapons, had they actually been used, would take months. That's how ridiculous this story is. And the corporate media is already out there saying that anybody who doubts the government, oh, you're just shame on you. Okay. If that's your entire argument, you've already lost it. All right, let's take some phone calls here. Steve Elkins, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, you started off right away with using a term I would say is war crime.
Yes.
I was very angry Friday night when I came home and found out what was going on. But I wanted to say also the coalition they brought in, the UK and France, I can assume that we'll find out later on they were paid to come along. And that's usually what the United States does to buy a coalition to do something when they know it's wrong. One other thing I'd like to bring out is also this strike on this supposed chemical weapons site. Now, if you remember what happened, because you mentioned the Gulf War, well, didn't we create a Gulf War syndrome by blowing up a chemical weapons site or a munitions dump or something we blew up there? Another thing I would ask for is for proof, which they never did. Their intel was never there to begin with. Satellite photos. No satellite photos whatsoever to tell you this is a weapons plant, a chemical weapons plant, nothing to provide the proof they needed to do what they did. So they acted outside of the law. This is a war crime.
Yep.
And my question to you is, now, correct me if I'm wrong, the term, the president being called the chief, the chief of the armed services.
Commander-in-Chief.
Chief of the armed services. Yes, Commander-in-Chief. That is only a term you can use if you are actually engaged in a war, correct?
Correct.
So he is actually has stated that we are at war with Syria, basically. If he's calling himself the commander-in-chief, then this is not just a conflict. This is actual war, and he's acting outside because this has not been determined. He's never gone to Congress. And I've always said that these guys, presidents, go outside the law. They don't have to go to Congress if they say it's a conflict, not a war. If they use the word war, then they have to get permission from Congress. Outside of that, it's a skirmish, it's a conflict, it's not a war. I don't need your permission. Correct?
Yes. Well,
yeah, that's what I thought.
The other phrase they use is police action. It's not a war. It's not even a conflict. It's just a police action, like we're the world's policemen. I want to back up here on the situation in Iraq because, again, we were being told that these balloon inflators were portable biological weapons labs. We were told there were nuclear weapons. We were told there were chemical weapons, even though, like Syria, Saddam had surrendered all of that stuff under UN supervision. It turns out that Gulf War syndrome is actually radiation sickness from exposure to the aftermath of the use of depleted uranium shells.
Uranium, right, okay, yeah. Well, it just didn't make sense to me. Why would you blow up a chemical weapons factory? It makes no sense to me that you would blow it up and it would be airborne in the air, expose all these people to some harmful chemicals if that was true. I agree, it was a hoax. This was a staged photos. All that stuff was staged very well, but not convincing enough to me because I could see it. I actually saw there was one girl they had in the paper. She was dressed in a hazmat suit. All the other people taking care of her had nothing on, and she had no oxygen on. And I'll tell you right now, the first thing you get when you come into exposure from an inhalant, a toxin like that, is oxygen. You're on 100% oxygen. The little girl sitting there, her eyes are kind of batting like she's delusional. She has no oxygen on, and she's sitting upright. So it doesn't fit the picture.
No, it didn't. We know this government lies to us. They lied to us about Saddam's nukes. They lied to us about torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin, Spanish mine in Havana Harbor, the Lusitania wasn't smuggling weapons, and blah, and blah, 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 and so forth and so on. We know this government lies us into war. It's what they've always done, and they're trying to do it again.
And this latest thing with the Pentagon saying all your missiles hit their targets. Now, you can talk to any mathematician, and he'll tell you the probability of that is very, very small to hit 100%. So, you know, that's a lie right off the bat when they said that they hit every target 100%. That's impossible.
Well, what they're saying is they hit all of the intended targets with about 1/3 of the missiles intended. So it's weasel wording. But again, out of 105 munitions deployed, 71 were shot down. Anyway, Steve, stay on the line. We've got to take a break for commercials. I'll come right back to you after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Steve Elkins. We're talking about this war crime that has been committed by President Donald Trump and his advisors in Syria Friday night, where they sent in 105 cruise missiles to hit 5 buildings. You get to pay for all this, of course. And the claim that they were biological weapons storage facilities or chemical weapons storage facilities, it doesn't make sense. As Steve pointed out, as Paul Craig Roberts pointed out, had the U.S. actually bombed real chemical weapons depot, there would have been a toxic cloud spreading all over the immediate part of the city, and there would have been thousands and thousands of people dead or dying. And there's been no reports of any of that whatsoever. Steve, you got anything else to share with us?
You know, you hit that right on the money. They said that it doesn't fit the picture. There was nobody admitted to a hospital needing oxygen, and that's the first thing you would have seen coming in through the ER. They've been slapping oxygen on everybody to kind of get your oxygen level back up. You didn't see it, and like I said, it didn't see any satellite photos. The thing that bothers me is I had a caller on my show on Sunday talking about accountability, and I noticed they always skirt accountability when they use this little lame excuse of, well, we had faulty intelligence, and that seems to be the walking, how they get to walk away from responsibility for these things. They just said, well, we had faulty intelligence, but we meant well, and we didn't get it right, so that's the way it goes. This is how we spread democracy. You know, I don't like that non-accountability. I believe everybody's accountable. I'm accountable, you're accountable, and I hold my government accountable for huge screw-ups, first of all, and they never had the authorization. They didn't have the unification or people on board on this, because we saw it. We saw it. This was not real. This was a hoax, and that's why they rushed so fast. I was just stunned that they actually decided to do it on Friday the 13th, which is kind of odd. Whether they try to send a message with that also being the superstition part of it, but I don't know. I'm very upset about this president. I've pretty much pulled all my support from him, and at this point, I would be happy if he was gone and somebody else tried to take over and patch up, repair the damage this man has done internationally. I mean, he promised a lot of things on the campaign trail, working with other world leaders, commerce, fair trade, and we're not getting any of that. I feel very, very duped and taken advantage of.
Yes.
And I want accountability. I want accountability on this.
I absolutely agree with you, and the only way I'll support Trump in 2020 is if Hillary runs again. Other than that, I'm in the market for a new candidate. So, Steve, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go.
Got it.
And before we get more of these phone calls, somebody actually mailed me some information from the CDC about how to deal with a chemical weapon attack. And it says right here, the first thing you do is you get the clothing off, because the clothing will act like a wick. It absorbs the chemical weapons, and it will keep conducting them to the skin. And it's, in fact, here's a direct quote. Quickly take off clothing that has a chemical on it. Any clothing that has to be pulled over your head should be cut off instead of being pulled over your head. If you are helping other people remove their clothing, try to avoid touching any contaminated areas and remove the clothing as quickly as possible. You see any naked kids in that white helmet video? They weren't behaving like people really dealing with a chemical weapons attack. They didn't have gloves. Yeah, they had the face masks, but they didn't do any precaution. They just hosed down the kids. And with certain chemical weapons, that could actually make things worse rather than better. The whole thing is a big steaming pile of USDA choice bovine excrement, starting with the attack in Duma, starting with the justification, or continuing with the justification for last Friday's strike, and now following up with this claim that, oh, the reason there's no evidence of the chemical attack is Russia tampered with the site. At this point, I'm pretty sure there was at least a couple of these cruise missiles that were aimed at Duma. And they did the strike just before the scientists were supposed to start work there. I think that's why they rushed it and didn't wait for the Harry S. Truman. So, anyway, all right, we're going to start with Dustin in New Jersey. And Dustin, I'm going to have to take you through the commercial break, but what's on your mind?
Mike, it's not over yet.
No, of course not.
I said it on Friday. It's going to get worse. But you said the Russians are sending ships that are full with troops. One of them, I think.
No.
Iran says we're going to...
No. The report is there's two of these so-called Alligator-class warships, but they also have large cargo carrying capacity, and they're carrying armored vehicles and various other reinforcements for the Syrian military.
I was just reading that they just told Syria we're ready to give you assistance with anything now, and I'm hearing Iran's threatening to attack Israel, like because they lost 30 officers at that attack the Israelis did.
Well, Israel and Iran are threatening to attack each other. The only difference is Israel wants the U.S. to do it, whereas Iran is willing to fight their own battles.
Yeah, Mike, the ambassador to the OPCW said, yeah, they cleaned it up. Yeah, like they probably just took a couple sponges and went, come on. See, that's why they did the airstrike, to make it, so they had time
I'm convinced that Duma was targeted, but that all the missiles targeted on Duma were successfully shot down. Dustin, stay on the line. We're going to do another commercial break. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go back to the phones. Dustin in New Jersey. We're talking about Syria. We're talking about just how obvious and ham-fisted all these lies have been to justify this missile strike. And you really ought to be insulted that the government and the corporate media really think you are that stupid and gullible that you're going to buy all of this nonsense.
Especially, hey, Mike, especially after if you bomb, like you said, if you bomb the chemical facility, and then a couple hours later, everybody's climbing on the rubble, nobody's keeling over. Obviously, this was bogus. There was no chemical plant, and you know it because the White Helmets put out the original scam.
Yes.
And then there's a cardiologist who came out and he said the electrode cables weren't even connected to the right spots on the people. It's a big scam.
Yes.
It's a big scam, and you can't. People got to do research before you. You would think after Iraq, the people of the world would figure things out because they pulled the fool me once, shame on you; fool me twice, shame on me, right?
Yes.
How many more times? This is getting ridiculous, and people seem like they forget. Like, how can you forget Iraq? How can you forget? And Mike, I hate to say this, but WorldNet Daily, Jeremy Corsi, and all these guys, Q4Anon, and all. People got to do their own research, because I go on the forums and mention where people are like, Trump's appointed by God, he's doing a great job. I'm like, no, he did this. He did this, like Clinton did the aspirin factory.
Yes.
3 people got injured, Mike. And the last time he did it, the first time he did it, how many people died? Syrian Air Force officers. For what?
Well,
for what?
We still don't know the death toll from Syria because those 71 munitions that were intercepted in flight, they still came down somewhere. And until they go on out and find the wreckage and see who got crushed underneath it, it may be that Trump has killed far more people in Syria than supposedly died at Duma.
But they didn't even use the S-300 version 4s or the S-400, I believe. I think they used a lot of the Panzer S-1s, but because they avoided the Russian areas.
Yes.
You know why? Because they would have released a can of whoop ass on us. That's why.
They absolutely
But this
would.
is not over. Mike, this is not over, and the next couple, it's gonna. I don't know, but it's just not over. They're not going to let up. I think the Russians by now know this, especially after Mike Pence says, "Now do you guys get the message?" He said that.
Yes, he
very
actually
diplomatic,
did say that.
huh?
Not very diplomatic at all. And it gets worse than that, because according to this story that came out of Russia today, Donald Trump did want to attack Russian and Iranian targets last Friday night, and he was talked out of it by SecDef James Mattis, saying, you don't want to do that. So good for Mattis. He's going along with the war agenda, but he realizes just how dangerous it would be going up against Russia, especially with China openly showing support for Russia in this conflict.
But how long is Mattis going to be able to hold out, Mike? This is what's scary. Donald Trump has flipped his wig. Come on, people. He's not God's appointed one, and George Bush wasn't either, because they used that line too. I'm sorry, but the guy is a dirtbag. He's a dirtbag. He should have done his job. He's like when he ran, he said we were not going to be there. We're getting out, and he stabbed us all in the back.
Yes,
Mike,
he did. He did. The fact that he was actually talking about attacking the Russians in Syria shows that, I have to question his sanity now. And he's dangerous. He's very, very dangerous. He's caught up in the glory of war, and he's getting bad advice from all of his advisors, except for Mattis, who seems to be holding the middle ground. But the neocons, they want Russia smashed up, they want China smashed up, they want Iran smashed up, they want Syria under new puppet rule that will allow Israel to annex the Golan. And that's really what's driving all of this stuff.
It ain't going to happen. And, Mike, I was on the message boards and forums, and everybody who voted for Trump, I mean, it's just like 90%, 95% was like, I'm not voting for this guy again. And then do you see that scumbag Sebastian Gorka and all those Fox News people? They're all like, yeah, you know, like we got to go. And, you know, they had that one brigadier or just general on or something, and they're like, Sebastian Gorka started freaking out on him and Laura Ingraham.
Yes.
Like, they're psychopaths, Mike. You know, Sebastian Gorka I never liked. I don't even know who the hell he is. You know, where'd he come from?
Yeah.
You know, like, you know, would they pull him out like that other guy they had? They said he was in the CIA, remember?
Yeah.
Fox News. You know, so you can't trust Fox News. Fox News is another corporation. They got interest. They do Lockheed Martin commercials or Boeing commercials, and so they don't care about the children over there. None of these people care about the kids. You know, notice, Mike, one more thing before I hang up. Where's the aid coming from all the UN nations to help the Syrian people? The only ones I saw today was the Russians bringing in fruits and vegetables. I didn't see one aid package come from the United States, Britain, or France, or any of them, because they're all scumbags, Mike. They're scumbags.
They're too busy dropping bombs. All right. Thanks a lot for the phone.
Thank you, Mike.
All right, we're going to let you go here. Let's see. John in Tennessee, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Well, first of all, I think this missile strike was as innocuous as the one a year ago. But if we're still moving battleships towards the Mediterranean, you know, we just bought some time, and like Dustin said, it's not over yet. But if you and I can pick this apart a little bit, I think RBN and us independent media, we can stay on top of where the next battle is going to be. Every morning at 9 Eastern, when the Fox News Channel goes to Bill Hemmer, the first 20 minutes is when they trot out these retired generals and they give their war plan. So this morning, they had some reporter. Now, you said the Golan Heights is Syrian territory, correct?
Yeah, it's still technically part of Syria, but it's occupied by Israel.
It's okay. So they have a reporter out there at 4 p.m. in Jerusalem, or whatever, 4 p.m. in Israel, and it says Golan Heights, Israel. It doesn't say Syria, okay?
Yeah.
So this guy's doing his report. He says, right over my shoulder here, you can see Syrian residences. And he says, this is all rebel controlled. Now, I mean, I'm picking this whole thing apart. So if it's rebel controlled, that means they're anti-Assad, correct?
It's kind of hard to figure out what
they're saying it's rebel. Go ahead.
No, he may be saying that they're rebels, which means they're opponents to Assad, or they may be opposed to Israel's incursions. You could read that either way, but probably you're right that he's talking about the anti-Assad people.
Okay, so if Assad were to go attack those people, right, to get them out of his country, right next to the Golan Heights, or if he tried to take the guy, you see what I mean? You're going to have a dust-up with Israel. I mean, it's Assad's business to take those people out if it's rebel hell. It's none of Israel's business. You see what I mean? And the reason he went, they're brewing up the next conflict over the Golan Heights. And then if we have ships in the Mediterranean, how hard would it be to get involved in that skirmish so Israel can just take all the Golan Heights in a big battle?
Well, that's the reason.
I can't imagine ISIS wants to. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say that's the reason when Trump started talking about pulling out of Syria, that's why Netanyahu got on the phone to him and read him the Riot Act. Because if the U.S. goes out of Syria, and with Assad having pretty much defeated ISIS and al-Qaeda, Syria is going to want to take that Golan back. And Israel doesn't want to give it back. They want that oil and gas. They want that money. And they think that's a natural law.
Well, and if these are anti-Assad people, or if they're ISIS people, aren't they Aren't they right on Israel's border too? You see what I mean? Again, technically it's Syrian territory, but it's Israeli occupied. And then you have these so-called Muslim extremists right next door to Israel, which they won't tolerate, right? I mean, we should pick this apart and watch this, because there's a reason they brought up the Golan Heights, and there's a reason this guy was reporting from there, and there's a reason he emphasized this is rebel hell territory right over my shoulder. Well, Golan Heights is also, So I'm just watching this thing, and I think this strike was innocuous. It didn't do anything. They leveled a building. Nobody trusts any of this stuff. But, I mean, now Alex Jones, you heard about his meltdown, I'm sure.
Yes.
But, he's doing this. We have to do everything we can to support Russia and Russian candidates who are against World War III. Okay, well, I'm sorry, the neocons are saying that Russia is going to attack Israel, so we have to be anti-Russian. I mean, what kind of game are all these people playing with us here? They're telling us all to pick a side, but the whole thing is bunk from the get-go, right?
Yeah, well, no leader in history ever led his people into a war by telling them the truth. Hey, we're going to take a bunch of your kids and we're going to go into this other country and we're going to steal their wealth and territory and their natural resources, and a lot of your kids are going to get killed and crippled, but hey, we've got to do it because you're all loyal members of our country. It wouldn't happen. Wars are started with lies, fraud, and deceptions. The Pearl Harbor, Lusitania, the Gleiwitz incident.
Well, and again, because of this action now, they're pouring out the rhetoric from all sides. Alex Jones is caught up in it, and they're demanding that everybody take sides. The last thing I wanted to say was that Ollie North was on Hannity Thursday night, and he gave him a map with 32 places that they need to strike to wipe out Assad's Air Force and wipe out the S-400 missiles and all this stuff. And I think that's still going to happen, And maybe we did tip off Russia going, get out of there, because we're trying to sell weapons to somebody. So there's going to be more strikes to come. And then it can distract from whatever they found in Cohen's office. They probably got every girl Trump slept with for the last 20 years in there, and recordings. So.
Yeah, probably. And I mean, it's all over the media here, and Fox is talking about the midterm elections and will the tax cuts see them through. There have been global protests against this U.S. aggression in Syria, and you're not going to see any of it on the corporate media, which is why we have to report it here.
Well, what if the Democrats take up that mantle that Trump didn't go to Congress? Because don't they have 20 CIA candidates that want to take Democratic seats to get him impeached? This whole thing is a soap opera. Everybody wants Trump out of there. So they may have just hoodwinked him into firing off an attack, which was, a war crime, and now the Democrats will go after him for a war crime.
So far,
even though they didn't care when Obama did it for Libya.
So far, the Democrats seem to be fully on board with this. Because otherwise we would have heard from them by now, and we haven't. Okay.
All right. Well, like I said, we're going to stay on top of the independent media because we're getting pulled all sides, and unfortunately, the sheeple out there, I think they're turning their TVs off. They don't want to see it.
No, I have a comment about that a little bit later in the program. Anyway, John, we're going to let you go. The phone lines are really loading up here. We're going to switch to Kevin in West Virginia. Aloha, Kevin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mr. Mike. This is Syrian attack. This is disgusting. First off, that's the first thing I wanted to say. The second thing I wanted to say, Donald Trump has plastered his name on the brick-and-mortar side of the military-industrial complex. Now, I was going to call him the fluffer boy of the ISIS and military-industrial complex, because that's, in my eyes, that's what he's turned into. We're plagued with this thing called a memory, where 5 years ago, we didn't want to be Al-Qaeda's Air Force. And now look what we do last year and then on Friday night. This is insanity. Complete insanity.
Yeah, it is. It's absolutely complete insanity. And maybe he's being set up. I don't think so. I think this is the continuation of the war agenda that General Wesley Clark blew the whistle on all those years ago. And Syria was on that list of to be conquered and regime changed. And they have to finish in Syria before they're positioned to go into Iran. And I think that's why everybody's saying we have to win Syria. And I'm sure there's a lot of voices out there saying we can't afford to be seen to lose in Syria. And so they're going to keep on pouring more and more money and more of the lives of our children into this conflict so that they can look good.
You know, that last caller brought up Conan, Conan, whatever the lawyer's name is.
Yes.
My advice is just own up to it. Just own up to it. None of us care who he slept with. It's not even a big deal. But I think what they do have on him and how he is compromised is through his casino dealings. And I think that's you know, they're blackmailing him or compromising through that, as well as, you know, Jared Kushner. And my last thing, you know, I'm not defending him when I say this. I'm not defending Donald Trump at all. But I am alluding to the video Friday night during his press conference. He looked like somebody that was being held hostage and reading off of a script like he didn't want to do it. I don't know if you caught that or if anybody else caught that, but to me it looked like, and I think they pulled a coup on him Friday night, physical and political.
Well, it may be. But we certainly did not get the Donald Trump we all voted for, and we're all disappointed about it. And you know, if they're going to impeach him, at this point, I'm not enthusiastic about trying to defend him.
No, neither. I'm done. I'm done with this president. I mean, you know, I can't trust him anymore. This is not what I voted for. You know, I want to raise a little one up and have him or her have, you know, the same rights and freedoms, you know, live in a great country. Not now. Not the road we're going down now. I mean, I'm done with this president. I mean, I don't know. I think in 2020 you're going to get somebody even far left than Bernie Sanders, which is scary in my book. But Trump's just a one-term president. He's not going to be voted in 2020.
He may not even get to the end of his first term. He hasn't really dealt with the issue of election fraud. And that means that the Democrats are probably going to get control of Congress this November. And yeah, they'll impeach him. They'll just make whatever they want up and vote him out. That's what's going to happen.
I agree. Well, give Miss Claire the best, and I hope you have a great and wonderful day. And be safe.
I'll do my best on this. Thanks a lot for the phone call. All right, we still have a bunch of callers waiting on the line, but we're coming up on a commercial break. So I'm going to wait till after the commercial break to take the phone calls here. Anyway, huge protests all around the world, here in the U.S., Great Britain. Get your bloody hands off of Syria. And it's important that we find these articles and we get them out there where people can see it, because the corporate media is trying to create the illusion that everybody's on board with this. Everybody thinks it's great. War, it's fantastic. Going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go back to the phones here now. Mark in North Carolina. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, how you doing, Mike? Hey, Mike. You know, I'm getting the feeling now. I'm really starting to get a little concerned because I'm beginning to believe that Trump is insane. Alex Jones made an interesting comment, and I remember hearing about this, that Trump drinks about 12 Diet Cokes a day, okay, which has got loaded with aspartame and is really works in the brain. He's been doing this for a long time, from what I understand. The other thing is just watching his reaction. The tweets that he gave last week. On top of that, I heard that him and Bolton actually would. That's another insane thing to put Bolton in there in the first place, and they actually want to attack Russian and Iranian targets, and that supposedly Mattis told them not to, which I want, you know, which is possible. But I'd heard that Mattis didn't want to do anything in the first place, but then I heard it was his idea. So who knows what the truth is?
Well, here's my question. Here's my question. Is Trump any more insane than all the other people who are inside the executive branch? Because right now they seem so disconnected with reality. They're just caught up in this fantasy, this glory of war. We're going to go after Syria and Russia and China. Mattis seems to be the only voice of reason in there at all.
Well, you got a point there. And remember, too, a lot of these people are on drugs. They're on line, what do you call them? Psych drugs?
Prescription psychiatric medication, yeah. There's actually a pharmacy inside the U.S. Capitol building, so the members of Congress can get their meds conveniently.
Not like during the Cold War. I mean, I'm not saying these guys were great then, Congress, but they weren't in any hurry to in fact, if anybody started, clattering swords, people got very nervous. I mean, now nobody seems to understand. Nobody seems to understand what we're leading to. I thank God for one thing. If Putin is least as rational, he actually could have sunk the entire Sixth Fleet had he wanted to. I know the kind of weapons he has. I don't go mainstream news for my news. I go on different sites around the net, and there's no question what kind of weapons the guy's got. He could have sunk the entire dinosaur like the Sixth Fleet. But he also understood. He also understands that the next day, or maybe a day or two after, the nukes would be flying on both sides. And he's got children, he's got grandkids, and he thinks of them. Like Kennedy and Khrushchev thought about their kids and grandkids and relatives back in the Cuban Missile Crisis. Unfortunately, Trump doesn't seem to think of this. And that's why I say I think Trump, there's something really wrong with Trump. I think the man is out there.
I agree. Mark, we're out of time. Got to let you go. Got to do station identification. Got more callers waiting on the line when we come back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, hour number 2. We're going to go right back to the phones. Errol in the Netherlands, thank you for waiting so patiently. And what is on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Thank you for taking my call. Yesterday, I watched Red Sparrow. It's another movie from Hollywood.
Yes.
And it includes Jennifer Lawrence. She also is known for the Hunger Games.
Yes.
It's very ironic. And it's an anti-Russian, I just watched it yesterday, and it is an anti-Russian movie again. And what I just want to say before I'm going to hang up, because it's all obvious. They only make remakes in Hollywood. They don't get new things out, no new ideas. Everything. It's even worse, the scripting, the writings, when you look at movies nowadays. And when you look at how they do it, it's like Hollywood is implemented in the Department of Defense and in the United States government. So,
well, that's always been the case.
1 + 1 makes 2.
That's always been the case. But the reason Hollywood is putting out so few original creative movies is that the really independent thinkers, the really creative people who have their own ideas about the world have all been purged. We saw exactly the same thing following the McCarthy blacklistings, where all the best writers in Hollywood were accused of being communist sympathizers, and they were all blacklisted out of Hollywood. And Hollywood's quality went into a decline following that.
Mm-hmm. And exactly with that... just like the weapons of mass destruction, with Saddam Hussein. Now we have another script, exactly, almost not shock and awe, but we see, we're going to just bomb Syria because they have gassed Saddam or Bashar al-Assad has gassed his own people. Well, they were just finishing, and they let because in the Quran, many people don't know that. In the Quran says, I don't study Quran, I'm not religious at all, but I studied it. I just read it, and it says, when your enemy wants to fight with you or wants to attack you, you have a right to defend yourself. That's normal.
Yes.
But when your enemy wants to give up and he wants to surrender, you also, in the Quran says, you also have to listen to them, talk with them, and let them go when they want to live. And that is very important. And you don't see that in mainstream media. You only see Islamic this and terrorist this, only the Islamics, just like the Viet Congs, You get skunks, the goo guys, you know.
Yes.
It's exactly the same script, but in another jacket, in another context. So we are in the same path with another jacket, another context. So that's just what I want to say. The script is going very bad, and hey, thanks to the internet. You know why thanks to the internet? Because everything is now a pattern. You can research it, you can re-investigate it, and you can see a pattern forming. So thank you for my call, Mike, and have a good day, and best to Claire.
All right, thanks an awful lot. And before we take our next caller, I need to point on out that we're seeing the beginnings of an attempt to silence the independent media. And they're trying to figure out a way they can do it without somebody mounting a lawsuit based on the First Amendment, which allows us to have our opinions out there. And they're trying to create this idea of there being fake news and how all the criticisms of U.S. Foreign policy are coming from either anti-Semites or Russian troll bots. And they're just trying to regain control of the narrative in the minds of the American people. And they're not having much success. All right, Dan in Oklahoma. Aloha, Dan. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I Bloody Mary stood in front of a mirror 3 times to say her name. Well, I didn't know this. I didn't know that when you stood in front of a mirror in the dark, say Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton shows up. You know, it's a funny joke I had. But anyway, if this war in Syria is really, you know, there's many, like with Kennedy, there was many reasons for his assassination. With this war, there's many reasons why they need to be there. If it's true, if it's about oil, it's about oil. And we don't even need oil. We know that HHO is a possibility, and we know that cutting our dependence from the monopolies is would deal a huge blow to this to the New World Order, and that's what I would suggest people to do by restoring the community on a local level. And by, you know, the funding for a project would be necessary, obviously, for a prototype generator to cut people's dependency off the grid. And I think that's would be a huge leap in the positive direction.
I think you're talking about a technology that hasn't really been proven out just yet. And I know that wonderful things can be accomplished with science and technology. But so far, I've seen a lot of these so-called water generators. Even Mythbusters did a show about it. The energy required to split the hydrogen from the oxygen is greater than the energy that you get back recombining them. And if you're not able to get more energy out of a system than you're putting in, then it really isn't useful in any applications. They obviously did it on the Apollo spacecraft, because they needed that small, compact source for electricity and drinking water, and it didn't matter how much energy they had to spend making it while it was still on Earth. Anyway, Dan, we're going to let you go and switch over to Jeff in St. Paul. Aloha, Jeff. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, in your preceding subject, they couldn't make it efficient because they didn't have elbow coils, but I wanted to have a tribute to Art Bell, our first podcast guy we used to listen to late at night, and I actually got into shortwave radio, and he was pretty cool. I actually tuned my radio from WCCO to KSTP one afternoon, and then when I got up at 2 in the morning, there he was, Art Bell. I learned all about Area 51 and UFOs, and I have affection for independent guys like you.
Well,
because you are kind of our Bell now.
I'm not really comfortable with that. I mean, Art Bell obviously had an audience, and he was highly respected. But as you say, he was into things like Area 51 and Hollow Earth and a bunch of stuff like that, which is not what we do here at WhatReallyHappened.com and Republic Broadcasting.
Oh, that's true. But you know, because you are cool. Because you know, we listen. I have a couple friends that listen to you. I write down your, I have 3x5 cards, and I give your website and a few other people, and I tell them, what a great podcast, 3 to 6, Monday through Friday. And so you get more listeners, so I'll let you go and talk to you next time.
All right, well, thanks an awful lot, and thanks for helping to spread the word about Republic Broadcasting. And yeah, our numbers are going up. They really are. Okay, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining the network, and we're going to take another phone call from Martin in California. Aloha, Martin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Good to talk to you. Earlier, you mentioned that there wasn't much Democratic opposition to this war, and there's not a lot, but there's an interesting tweet from Rand Paul where he retweeted a tweet from Justin Amash, who's I believe, a Republican representative. And here I'll read the tweet. Witness the hypocrisy that our two-party system breeds. Check out these similar letters warning the president about commencing offensive strikes against Syria without congressional approval. In 2013, when Obama did it, there were 119 Republicans and 21 Democrats which signed the letter. In 2018, there were 15 Republicans and 73 Democrats. Very few of us signed both. And the letters are very similar in that they say we write for our shared concern that you're not going to Congress, and it's quite long. I won't read the whole thing, but it's signed by these members of the House of Representatives. So there are 73 Democrats this time, but only 15 Republicans opposing it.
Well, unfortunately, Congress had an opportunity about a month ago, maybe a little longer, to basically take back their constitutional authority to decide when the nation goes to war, and it failed to pass. So, again, we know Trump is definitely being compromised. I would say that probably a lot of members of Congress are being compromised, either by the deep state, the Pentagon, their own stock portfolios full of stocks of military companies, or Israel has compromised them. But Congress had a right and an opportunity and a duty to take us back to the Constitution, which says only Congress can declare war, and they failed to do it.
Right, and these letters reassert that back, that only Congress can do that. Can I just make a quick comment on why I think Trump made this decision to attack some empty buildings, at least empty in terms of people? I think that he is walking a delicate line trying to appease the Israeli lobby, without which he wouldn't have been elected, and not get us into a wider war with Russia. I'm going to give some credit to him until he actually does something that causes Russia to strike back. I at least think he's the art of the deal, and he's negotiating, and he hopefully has back channel communication with Putin. So I'm going to hope for the best still.
Well, I hope you're right, but I'm not seeing it. Trump is becoming basically a bully. When you have that much power, your true character starts coming on out, and I think that's what we're seeing. And again, according to this report in Russia Today, Trump actually wanted to bomb Russians last Friday, and Mattis talked him out of it. And you know that we are really in a serious condition when the only voice of reason out there is a guy who's nicknamed Mad Dog.
Yeah, okay, I wasn't aware of that. I'll have to look that up. Well, in any case, I do believe that Trump knew right away when he saw that fake gas attack that it was fake. I don't think he's stupid. So I think he had to make some sort of a compromise decision, and hopefully he will continue to keep us out of a wider war. The threat they could be holding over him could be, well, if you don't do this, we will, light a mini nuke off in the United States, or crash the economy, or, do something to have a much larger false flag in the Middle East, like, a bomb, going off on.
Well, Nikki Haley's already out there saying that if they don't stop Assad, there'll be a chemical weapons attack here in the United States. They're telegraphing what their next step is.
And you don't think that they were assuaged by Trump's little attack here? I call it little because it didn't kill anybody. Actually, it was a lot of missiles.
We don't know who got killed. Now, the reason those buildings were empty is the attack happened at 4 in the morning local time. So all the people who worked in those facilities were home asleep in bed. Again, the unknown factor is that those 71 munitions that were shot down came down somewhere. And until all the wreckage is located and we see who is crushed and burned underneath it, we don't know how many people died. But again, if those had really been chemical weapons facilities, there would have been a toxic cloud released that would have been killing people for a mile around.
So those missiles that were shot down came from the ocean ships, right? Not from airplanes?
A little bit of both.
And none of the airplanes were shot down. Is that correct?
No, they were using standoff munitions, which means they stay out over the Mediterranean and they launch the surface-to-air, the air-to-ground missiles, and they fly horizontally to hit their target.
Okay, so they weren't in any danger of getting shot down, or maybe they were and they just weren't, or did we actually lose a plane and they're not telling us?
Could be any one of the above, and again, everybody lies during a war. We're seeing it right in front of our eyes. Anyway, Martin, we're going to let you go, and we're going to switch over to Mike in Chicago. Aloha, Mike. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, the reason I voted Trump was mainly, like you, because Hillary, I mean, that was just ludicrous, all right? But I remember him stating that, we have no business in these wars. And he knows that we have other problems here. We've got a homeless problem. We've got health care that people can't afford, wages, in the job situation. These are all part-time jobs here we're talking about.
Yes.
And, I don't know how people are able to, afford expenses. You talk about car insurance, health insurance, they can't afford. They don't have wages. The rents are going up. And the Federal Reserve is looking for 2% inflation. It's already here. I mean, the stock market is inflated. That's inflation. That's why it's 25,000 on the Dow. Okay, that's why nobody can afford health care. That's why we got all these homeless on the West Coast. Anyway, we have no business in other people's countries. We need to fix what's happening here at home. And we need to start implementing the laws that are on the books that you talk about immigration. We don't need to redo immigration. We just need to follow the laws.
We need the existing laws enforced.
Exactly. So the American people, I really feel sorry for us. Man, we're lied to, and this guy, maybe they told Trump, hey, if you don't go along with the program, you're going to wind up like Kennedy or in Reagan. So
well, who knows?
Maybe that's
at this point. How Trump got controlled is almost irrelevant. The fact that he's basically under control, it's repeating a pattern where politicians campaign on peace and prosperity for the American people, and all we get is more war and more war and more war. It goes all the way back to the 1990s and the Project for the New American Century, which set as its agenda the complete domination of planet Earth by the United States. And they said it was going to take 100 years to accomplish.
Yeah. Like I say, people cannot be sending their daughters and sons to die for something that we have no business in other countries. Absolutely no business. Or in fact, we have enough energy here for the next 200-300 years. I mean, we don't need to be going into these other countries and stealing their resources and forcing anything upon anybody.
It's not about stealing the resources. It's about controlling what currency those resources are traded in. Because more and more countries are turning away from the U.S. dollar, and unless the U.S. can get us back to a world where everybody goes through the U.S. dollar for cross-border banking and transactions, the U.S. dollar is going to implode. There's nothing else to prop it up. Our manufacturing has been in decline for 30 years. Even our weapons, which used to be the proudest achievement of American manufacturing, they're no good, and nobody wants our GMO agriculture. This is an empire in decline.
Exactly. I read a headline today. What is it? Trump and Trump is he wants to devalue dollar. I mean, come on, man. That's our savings. That's our currency. What do you? That's people's money. Why do you want a worthless currency, brother? I mean, and don't tell me, we're going to be exporting anything, because just what you said, Mike. We don't have that. We're not exporting anything besides that.
Well, we're exporting some, but not a whole heck of a lot. Not like we used to at the end of World War II. Anyway, listen, Mike, I got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And again, Republic Broadcasting needs your financial support. So does WhatReallyHappened.com. We're in a major fight trying to head off World War III. We've got the corporate media trying to find ways to silence us. They're going after our advertisers. They're attacking our servers. Corporate media wants us gone. We're stealing their audience away from them. And we have broken their monopoly on what Americans are thinking. And they don't like that. So if you can help, we really need it. We're not doing this for fun. We're serious. It's hard for us to ask for donations because we recognize that all of you are in as serious a financial crunch as we are. But we have to ask. If you can support Republic Broadcasting, the postal address to send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity, cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number to call to become a recurring subscriber is 800-724-2719, extension 03. And over on the main page of WhatReallyHappened.com in the right margin, there's a donate button for those of you who want to help out the website and keep us up and running. And I'm looking at Fox News, and they're still going over this Stormy Daniels affair. And I agree with that other caller. I don't care. I don't care who Trump took to bed or under what circumstances. It doesn't affect my life directly. But World War III sure as heck will. Now, Trump announced he was going to hit Russia with new sanctions because the claim is Russia has enabled Assad to have chemical weapons. Again, no proof. But Nikki Haley's announcing the sanctions. Basically, they're going to go to any companies that are dealing with equipment related to Assad and chemical weapons use. Now, Russia is out there saying that the U.S. is imposing sanctions merely for the Russian presence in the international arena. Because after all, that's our job to muck about with other countries. You just stay away, you're cutting in on our action. Russia has responded by basically drafting a bill suspending all cooperation with the U.S. companies in the nuclear, missile, and rocket areas and aircraft building areas. And that is really going to hurt, especially when you realize how dependent the United States is on those Russian-built rocket engines. Now, companies like SpaceX and some other startups are finally starting to produce reliable, usable rocket engines, but they can't produce in the volume needed by the military. So earlier today, we got a news headline that Trump has now stopped the plan for new Russian sanctions. As I mentioned earlier in the show, 4,000 U.S. troops have launched a massive military drill on the edge of Syria. It's called Eager Lion. Don't you love these names they come up with? And again, I think at some point there's going to be a U.S. ground invasion of Syria. to get that evil Assad. And Nikki Haley is out there saying U.S. troops are going to remain in Syria until our goals are met, without saying what those goals are. Obviously, the goals are no longer about getting ISIS and Al-Qaeda because they're pretty much gone. You know, we're back to the evil Assad is gassing his own people. We must save the Syrian people from their evil leader. And what the U.S., and for that matter Israel, is trying to do is divide and conquer the Middle East and turn country against country, get them to choose sides, and basically set up the game board for a regional conflict. Now, over at Russia Today, they have an article basically pointing out the hypocrisy and the double standards of the United States, Great Britain, and France, who are fully supportive of the Saudis in Yemen for killing civilians left and right using chemical weapons like white phosphorus. And at the same time, they're trying to pose as moral crusaders in Syria. And it is hypocritical. And it is a double standard. There's nothing moral about what the United States is doing in Syria. It is a war crime, plain and simple. It's illegal under international law. There is no UN resolution authorizing it. Congress has not authorized it. Trump just went off listening to his advisors and to Netanyahu and just ramped the war up again. And everybody knows it. Nobody's buying that there was a chemical weapon attack in Douma. Or that if there was an attack, they're not buying that Assad had anything to do with it. Because he had nothing to gain. It's simply, the story just doesn't make any sense at all. And why attack a bunch of children as opposed to attacking the enemy forces? Well, they picked a bunch of children to maximize the psychic shock and horror value. It's clearly propaganda. We're going to take a break for commercials, back with some phone calls after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Let's take a couple of phone calls, starting with David in San Francisco. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, Michael, I've told you before that I believe that the whole Syrian business has to do with the pipelines that Dick Cheney's company, Genie Oil Gas, has to do with. And it's kind of interesting because I had never really seen that Trump was invested with them, but the fact that he's now, playing the game that Syria has to be, Assad has to be deposed and we have to destabilize Syria, it's plain he's grasping at straws by playing with Dick Cheney. And that's, one of the oddities of this whole thing.
Well,
but
Cheney's got something on Trump, or Trump wouldn't have pardoned Scooter Libby. I mean, that stuff is just ancient history, and Scooter Libby did lie. He perjured himself, and this sudden pardon for Scooter Libby just came out of nowhere. Presidents normally will issue their presidential pardons toward the end of their term in office in order to stifle controversy. And supposedly
like
Dick
Oliver
Cheney...
North
Dick Cheney...
Oliver North got...
My turn. Supposedly Dick Cheney called up President Trump to thank him for the pardon, but it tells me that Cheney has a very unhealthy degree of influence over Donald Trump.
Something odd is going on with that, but there's a kind of a more simple explanation, and that's that because if you think about Interpol, like the world's police, that they handle crimes between nations, money laundering, drug running, things like that, art theft. If there's a war between two countries, then Interpol will have a tough time getting evidence to cross national boundaries. And if Trump has, some undue relationship with Putin, then it's to Trump's advantage to stir up war relationships between Russia and the United States.
Well, the only problem with that, the only problem with that is that Mueller and a lot of other people have been spent more than a year and several $1 million trying to find some kind of a relation between Trump and Putin, and they haven't found it. So I think that this being a motive for the attack on Syria is rather weak. It may be more a case of distracting the media away from the Stormy Daniels affair, which, if that was the case, it didn't work because they're still obsessed about it. But you need to remember that wars and assassinations never happen for just one reason. There are all these overlapping interests with different agendas, but they all have the same solution. We need to assassinate John F. Kennedy, or we need to go on into Syria. Certainly the pipelines were one of the factors.
Right. Yeah, right. And the thing that, whether or not it's Trump and Putin per se, I think it's more an issue of, and I think I've raised this before on earlier shows, when you look at the fall of the Soviet Union back in 1991, the world's, the big money of the world shot into the former Soviet Union and just bought up everything they could buy.
Yes.
And whether it was, there's an allegation that the CIA came up with about I think it was just short of a $500 billion bond issue, and they just bought up every port, every dam, every highway, every apartment complex, factories, mineral rights, and whether it was MI6 or whether it was the opium smugglers of the Middle East or whether it was organized crime or the Rothschilds, everybody with big money swooped into the brand new Russian Republic and just bought everything up. And that's who these oligarchs are. And they basically have been needing to get cash in and out of this Russia. And so Trump, being a money launderer, that was his job. And so whether it has to do with Putin per se or the various oligarchs, it's kind of beside the point. It's still a matter of evidence.
I don't see your foundation for claiming that Donald Trump was involved in the money laundering. I mean, if the Russian oligarchs wanted to get their money out of Russia easily and cleanly, they could have gone to the Clinton Foundation.
Well, we're talking massive regular amounts. You know, if you look at the Clinton Foundation allegation, that's like a one-time shot of X amount of, millions or something. But in terms of being able to do billions on a steady, ready rate, the idea of being able to, convey assets through Trump Towers, and Trump Towers being money laundering operations for, for various institutions.
What is your basis? What is your basis for the claim? I mean, it sounds to me as unsupported as your claim that there was some kind of a nefarious connection between Trump and Putin.
Well, if you look at Meyer Lansky, you remember he was doing. Biographies of Meyer Lansky had him doing money laundering from the late 30s, I believe, to basically the early 60s when he got too hot. And when in the early 60s, of course, Roy Cohn was in New York, and if you look at the same families that Meyer Lansky was working with and Roy Cohn were working with, it would seem to me that Roy Cohn took up not all of what Meyer Lansky was doing, but a part of it.
Yes.
And so the families needed to do money laundering. Donald Trump was ready and able to take part in whatever Roy Cohn got him set up.
That's not supported. You don't have anything to support
I think it is.
It's an allegation.
Yes and no. I mean, if you look into the various books about, there are various families that were involved in various needs, and you get into one of the interesting videos that came up about 9/11 was that this bond issue of the CIA's $500 billion that bought up the former Soviet Union. That bond issue was put together almost exactly 10 years earlier. It was September 12th of 1991, and that the various windows of the World Trade Center building that were hit were the various offices where the bond issue were put together. And then, of course, the Pentagon, the angle of the Pentagon was that was hit was the Financial Investigation Center.
Yes.
And so the documents about the financing, I think you can look this up in YouTube. It's under, I think
David,
it's called Black Eagle Trust and 9/11.
David, first of all, the people at the Pentagon's Financial Investigation Unit were trying to track down some $3.5 trillion missing Pentagon dollars. Right. It would be inappropriate for the Pentagon to be investigating civilian financial crimes. That would fall under the U.S. Treasury and the Department of Justice. Anyway, we've got a bunch of callers waiting online, so thank you for the call, David. We're going to let you go and switch over to Paul in New Jersey. Aloha, Paul. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. Michael, I'd like to bring to your attention a video I saw at LiveLeak, and it's called Effects of 76 Cruise Missile Strikes. And what they show you in the video is the destruction of that chemical facility.
Yes.
And one of the things I noticed is among the, the wreckage, they show a pile of basically a drug, which is called Oxycan. And actually, it is the American equivalent of naloxone, which is the drug they use, or Narcan, which is used for people with opioid overdoses.
Yes.
So you have to wonder, when America goes bombing, do all the companies line up and submit to the generals the targets they want knocked out to knock out their competition, so their business will prosper after the competition is knocked out? I mean, America has a habit of doing this in the Iraqi war, also with Clinton bombing that aspirin factory back, I think it was in Somalia, back in the 90s. Sudan, yeah. And also, even if you think about it in the end of World War II, when we bombed Dresden, which was one of Germany's tobacco manufacturing powerhouses. I mean, that's what they did in Dresden, tobacco city. See? And so, in war, you destroy your enemy's means of production. You destroy whatever it is, pharmaceuticals, even their chocolate factories. And then at the end of the war, you hand out your chocolates, you hand out your cigarettes, or you take away their drugs to cure their sicknesses.
Well, yeah, that's probably an aspect of war that doesn't get looked at all that carefully. But we know that all wars ultimately are about economic power and influence. And that's certainly true. The U.S. wants to drag the world back to Bretton Woods. And so, yeah, everybody who's got any influence over the war-making machine, they're going to be saying, this target is advantageous for me if you hit it. And so, yeah, very, very possible. Now, in this
case...
I would
urge the Syrians, yeah, if they think they're going to be bombed, to go hide out in the Coca-Cola facility.
Absolutely. But in this case, again, the reason nobody got hit was the attack was at 4 in the morning. And basically Trump, a couple of weeks ago said, we're going to get on out of Syria. Everybody started accusing of being weak like Barack Obama, and we've got to show Syria that we're tough. And, oh my goodness, there's been this horrible chemical attack in Duma. We must respond. And it's gone downhill since then. The chemical attack in Duma probably didn't happen. Even if it did, it certainly wasn't Assad, given the past history of finding these chemical weapon precursors with the U.S.-backed terrorists. Then you had Friday's missile attack, which destroyed these 5 buildings, apparently without any concern that toxic elements might be released into the local atmosphere and kill far more people. And now, of course, the latest lie that the reason the OPCW scientists are not finding anything at Duma is Moscow has tampered with the site, which is really completely ridiculous.
And it may give them an excuse for a further bombing. However, I did like that President Trump said afterwards that mission accomplished, in the sense that this is over for now. And I think he's very half-hearted about this. I think he is relenting to the neocon pressure, ultimately. And that he's, even the attack seemed like it was kinder than I thought it was going to be. So, and I do believe the real heroes out of this are Putin and the Syrian government, the way they've taken the shot, and hopefully they're going to move on and end this war quickly, because that's the most humane thing that can happen, is to end the war, end the violence, and get on with rebuilding Syria. And I think an element of it could be that everyone knows the contracts for rebuilding Syria are going to go to the Russians.
Yes. It absolutely is going to be the case. I mean, America's rebuilding of the other countries they've smashed has been great for American companies that are hired to go on in and build things like police stations and stuff. But what they're actually building is junk. It's all about grabbing hold of more money. And these countries that have been attacked by the United States aren't really being rebuilt. There's at best a little bit of cosmetic work being done. But when you're talking about a national infrastructure that has been absolutely crushed, the quality of life has declined for the ordinary people of that country, these are all war crimes. And it's all done so that some specific politician or corporate CEO sees an advantage in it.
Yeah, and I wonder when this is all done, too, whether, you know, like American corporations like Starbucks or McDonald's or KFC are champing at the bit to get in there to put up Starbucks in Syria and establish themselves there. And that's the problem of being a belligerent and being seen as a belligerent worldwide, because I doubt Bashar al-Assad is going to want American corporations in there and setting up shop.
No, he's going to want the Russian corporations and the Iranian corporations to be in there setting up shop.
Exactly, and this is the problem. You know, everybody professes about how, you know, we're capitalists and we want free trade and all the rest and all of that, and yet it seems that when other countries are very good at free trade or doing business, like Russia supplying natural gas to Europe, right? We seem to get a bug up our butts, and we insist on like doing damage to someone else's progress.
Yes.
And you know, you think you'd want to reward the Chinese and the Russians for being good capitalists and being happy that, hey, they're capitalists now. And you think that would be part of our agenda, like we're meeting halfway. We're going a little commie and socialist here. They're going a little capitalist over there. What's wrong with the two meeting in the middle?
Well, the two meeting in the middle sounds really good. I'd like to see it happen. But again, we have an administration filled with people who basically came out of that project for the new American century, where the U.S. wants to conquer and control it all for the benefit of American corporations. And they're not doing very well, but that's not going to stop them from trying. Anyway, listen, Paul, we're going to let you go. We're going to take one more phone call from Vivian, and then we're going to close the phone lines because I am way behind on the talking points. So, Vivian, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, hi, Mike. I'd like to propose something that may sound preposterous, but I think is very realistic with regard to the way Israel operates. I believe that Soros is really at the core of Israel's plans and is actually functioning to create distractions within each of the nations so that they're so preoccupied with domestic issues and details that they cannot act in a unified manner to protect the planet. I mean, we know the way Israel operates. If they have an enemy, that enemy does not survive. They never miss their objective if they want to assassinate someone. Soros has always been there as a distraction, starting from the time when he was a teenager, when he was handing over anti-Zionist Jews and their wealth to the Germans, who were then transferring it over to the Zionists through the Ha'avar agreement.
Yes.
Now, I'm quoting a line from the Palestinian poet Mahmoud Darwish.
Okay, Vivian, I'm going to have to put you on hold. We got to take another commercial break. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Vivian. And Vivian, George Soros' agenda is he's pushing globalism, open borders, the New World Order. Obviously, he's a strong supporter of Israel, and I'm sure that protecting Israel figures into a lot of his thinking. But sometimes, again, it shows a double standard. Israel's at the forefront of preaching open borders to every other country. They want to get rid of the Ethiopian Jews from their own country. And rather than send them back to Ethiopia, they want to send them to Europe. And Soros is very much on board with all this. And we know all about how he was basically turning over his fellow Jews to the Germans for being anti-Zionist. So he's a completely, utterly ruthless man.
But what I contend is that it is not that he is actually in favor of globalization. What he's trying to do is create situations where people are so preoccupied with their apparent immediate concerns that they're failing to look. It's like being focused on the tree and not seeing the forest. We always take the bait. They throw out an incident for us to focus on and debate who's responsible, who's been bought off, who's been threatened, who is a puppet. There is no real nation anymore. Even here in Canada, our dimwit PM, Trudeau, who's pro-Palestinian, pro-Middle Eastern, is saying that he's supporting the Allies in their bombing of Syria. That was a farce. Syria will never be rebuilt. Iraq is not ever going to be rebuilt. Libya is a dead cause. Yeah, all of that is part of breaking up everything into a shambles so that it's all easily controlled. This whole game of globalization is only another name for destroying identities and loyalties. You destroy the family unit, you destroy the on and on until you finally get to the destruction of the nation state, and then it's easy to come in. And we are foolishly not looking, and again, I'm no expert, but there is one line from Mahmoud Darwish that says, the spectators are the authors. And in this case, the spectators are so busy focusing on the seat they're sitting on or the seat who's in the seat next to them, that they're not looking at the whole theater. This is really when they
I disagree. I disagree. I think because of the independent media that people are learning how to see the forest despite the trees. And again, we understand that the breakdown of borders and the breakdown of social identity is key to establishing the New World Order global government. Anyway, Vivian, we're going to let you go. We're coming up on station identification. And when we come on back with hour number 3, there's been a new development in the Skripal poisoning case, and it's just going to yank the rug out from that particular piece of propaganda. So just stay tuned. We should be hearing the music here any second for the break. And am I misreading the clock again? There it is. All right. We'll be back after station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are closed right now because I got a bunch of stuff to share with you. So let's get on over back to the Skripal poisoning case. And finally, after much arm twisting and so forth, Great Britain finally delivered samples of the supposed Novichok to the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, who in turn sent it up to one of the best laboratories in the world for determining what the chemicals actually were. And that was the independent Swiss state Spies lab. And what the Spies lab found was that among various other compounds in this material was an agent called BZ, which is shorthand for 3-quinonucleotidyl benzylate. There's a mouthful for you. And it is not a lethal agent, but it is a powerful, powerful hallucinogenic. It goes right for the acetylcholine receptors. It is far more potent a hallucinogen than LSD is. But it has a wide margin of safety, where somebody who's given an overdose, yeah, they're going to have hallucinations for days on end. But it's not going to kill them. And apparently, this drug was originally developed under the direction of the U.S. government in an effort to come up with a battlefield drug that would maximize the aggression of the soldiers. And apparently, on its first test, the test subjects turned on one another rather than on the opposing force. So, but it's still out there. And here's the kicker. Russia does not use or produce BZ, It is produced in the United States. It's produced in Great Britain. It's produced in many of the NATO countries. And so at this point, for BZ to be present there tells us that wherever this toxic substance came from that was used on the Skripals, it did not come from Russia. Now, over in Ukraine, we're starting to see some very alarming trends indicating that Kiev is going to try and cook up some kind of a war in Donbass. Yet another flashpoint to get us into a war against Russia. Down in Israel, the march for land is continuing. Israeli snipers are still shooting at the protesters. And rights groups are out there saying that peaceful protests don't represent combat, and therefore the IDF has no legal right to be shooting the protesters. Now, they've killed dozens, they've wounded well over 1,200 protesters, and the rules of engagement for the IDF is if they're out there protesting against Israel, well, that's a threat. And no, it isn't. Apparently in Palestine, 4 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza by suspected Israeli shelling. And apparently no particular reason why they did that. Just Israel being Israel again. Now, China just had a major military parade. It was a show of force and support for Russia. And in response, we're hearing all of this tough talk from the Pentagon, from General Joseph Dunford, chairman of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff, is out there saying that the Pentagon has a global campaign plan for China. So now they're talking about taking on China. It really is rather absurd. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the Navy. And the Navy's been hit by a huge number of scandals lately. There's the Fat Leonard scandal that involves something like 60, that's 60 admirals who were getting kickbacks for inflated naval contracts being sold by this Fat Leonard character. Then you have, of course, the recent issues with some of our warships colliding with cargo ships and tankers out here in the Pacific, which they tried to claim was a deliberate attack, and it wasn't. And now the U.S. Navy is accused of tech piracy. And apparently German software company Bit Management caught the Navy illegally installing this virtual reality software. And in 2011, the company agreed to license to the Navy 38 copies of its virtual reality software. And the Navy was reportedly happy with the software, and Bit Management began negotiating to sell additional copies. And then they discovered that the Navy had installed this software on more than 500,000 computers. So now there's a massive, massive lawsuit for intellectual property violations. Boy, it's not quite the Navy that we're shown in all those movies and TV shows and the commercials, and like Top Gun. Since the year 2001, you, the American taxpayer, have spent at least $4.5 trillion on wars. This is not including the trillions that simply went missing out of the Pentagon. So if you're walking around the streets of your town and you're wondering why the pavement is cracked and the metal's all corroded, and why there are hungry and homeless people all over, why there are so many retail vacancies, it's because all of the wealth of the country has been sucked out to give to the war machine. We've been living in a wartime economy for going on 20 years, and our nation is showing it. It is really showing it. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. Apparently over in Japan, the Japanese people are getting very angry with Prime Minister Abe. And apparently he is engulfed in quite a few of his own scandals. There's a feeling of crisis. And there was a huge rally in Tokyo demanding that Prime Minister Abe resign. This, of course, is going to put a crimp in efforts to find a peaceful solution for North Korea. All right, let's talk about some of the domestic political stuff that's coming along here. The FBI and the Department of Justice has confirmed that some of the memos Comey took when he was fired contained classified information. That's a Title 18 violation right there. When you are fired and you're in possession of classified information, you have to return it or certify that it has been destroyed. The Department of Justice and the FBI also asserts that Comey's leak to the New York Times targeting President Trump was unauthorized, and said that Comey's operating on the same level as WikiLeaks after all that criticism. Now, a lot of people are still trying to figure out what the heck was going on with James Comey when he basically just gave Hillary a get-out-of-jail-free card for the email scandal. And a lot of people are looking for very complex motives. Was he being blackmailed? It turns out that Comey's family were all passionate Hillary Clinton supporters. Some of them worked on her campaign. Comey's wife was just out there saying, it's time we have a woman president. I mean, forget about all the other stuff. Forget about the dead bodies. Forget about the corruption of the foundation. Forget about, but she's a woman. It's time for a woman president. And apparently, Comey's wife basically pressured him in to dropping the email investigation because they thought Hillary was going to win. Wrong on that count. Apparently, Comey's wife took part in some of those post-election demonstrations where the snowflakes went on out there and cried and screamed and popped bubble wrap and so forth and so on here. Now, as you know, the FBI raided the offices of Trump attorney Michael Cohen, and they're down in the gutter. This is all about that Stormy Daniels affair, and I'm sick and tired of hearing about it. I'm sick and tired of seeing her face on TV. And they stole, they confiscated a bunch of materials, some of which Comey says have actually nothing to do with the case that was on the warrant. And they're not supposed to do that either. Well, an attorney for President Trump has asked a federal judge to allow the president and his lawyers to have the first look at the FBI evidence seized in the Michael Cohen office raid. Now, I have a comment about that, and that is a thing called attorney-client privilege, which is supposed to be inviolable. And in their eagerness to get Donald Trump, they violated attorney-client privilege. They violated the scope of the warrant. They're down there in the gutter dealing with porn stars. It betrays just how desperate they are. Now, I am very disappointed in Donald Trump, okay? But we all have to play by the rules. If we don't play by the rules, then we're no better than the government itself is. And I don't want to go there. Another story that came on out, this is before it's news, that the main reason Hillary was not indicted is because everyone in Washington, D.C. was tied to that Clinton Foundation. And that was something that we suggested might be the case all the way back when the email case first broke and nothing was being done. Hillary had all this money. It was basically a slush fund and a money laundry all in one, and everybody was dipping into it. If the entire truth about the Clinton Foundation ever came out, it would probably be the biggest single scandal in U.S. history, outdoing the Teapot Dome, for example. Now, right now, governments and big banks are stockpiling gold, an indication that they think there's going to be some kind of an upset in the paper currencies. Russia and China are certainly grabbing as much gold as they can. People keep asking, how much gold is still in Fort Knox? Trust us, the American people's gold is still there, really, honest. We talked about this on the Gold Conspiracy, the History Channel. We don't know what's down there. Remember when Germany wanted to repatriate their gold? They got that big stall from the New York Fed. And when they finally got their gold back, it wasn't the same bars Germany had set over there for storage. They were new bars, and they turned out to be far less pure than what Germany had sent over. The New York Fed was using the gold. They would take it in, charge a fee for storage in their gold vaults, and then when nobody was looking, it would go out the back and be rehypothecated for some other purpose. Bunch of crooks over there. The global debt bubble has hit a new all-time high. It's always going to do that because of private central banking. The debt grows faster than the available money supply. So the global debt bubble has hit $237 trillion with a T. Global debt increased 10% in 2017 to nearly a quarter quadrillion US dollars. There's no way to pay it off. That's the problem with private central banking. The debt that is being created can never be paid off. There isn't enough money. We could all wind up standing in the middle of the street, totally naked, no food, no housing, no nothing, and there still would not be enough money to pay that debt off. It's a system of enslavement. And that's what the bankers want. They want us all to be their debt slaves. One planet, one government, one private central bank. To hold the human race in debt bondage until we go extinct. Now, here's an interesting little report. This came out of Project Republic today. And apparently, there's a new report examining the budgets of both the Defense Department and the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And it found that between the years 1998 and 2015, these two departments alone misplaced, over $21 trillion in American taxpayer funds. That's enough money to pay off the officially acknowledged national debt. Now, the report was written by Dr. Mark Skidmore, a professor of economics at Michigan State University, and Catherine Austin Fitz. I'm sure you've heard that name before. And it says the missing money is a direct result of unsupported journal voucher adjustments made to the department's budgets. There's all these creative bookkeeping, mark to market and so forth. Whatever happened to, this is what we've got, this is what we spent, this is what we have left over. Huge sums of money have disappeared into the Pentagon and HUD. And I don't think we should give the Pentagon any more money until they find out where all of that went. Because if we give them more of our trillions, what are they going to do? They're going to misplace it. They'll just lose it. It's going to go into somebody's pocket. Another article out here, this is from AntoniusAquinas.com, basically saying at this point, the only thing that's going to save the world from a U.S.-initiated global war is an economic collapse. And I think that's what we're all going to have to work toward, finding a way to bring the economy down in order to forestall World War III. Now, do you remember back when Bill Clinton was president and they made a big deal about his federal budget surplus? Oh, look at all that money. We've got a federal budget surplus. And then it later came on out that what Bill Clinton had done was basically take the cash buildup in Social Security that was putting in there for the expected surge in baby boomer retirements, and he moved it to the General Revenue Fund and he spent it. And that was a huge mess. Well, apparently, because baby boomers are still retiring, the current Social Security Trust Fund has a $2.9 trillion surplus. And apparently, Congress just voted to basically commandeer that as part of cost reductions. So they're basically embezzling you, the American worker. Because that money in Social Security is not their money. It's your money that you were coerced into placing in trust with the government. And the government just showed they can't be trusted. Bill Clinton proved that. These politicians just proved that. The last official act of any government is to loot the nation. And this is an indicator that's what's going on right now. Now, Donald Trump and Republicans want to deal with the issue of welfare cheats. And we need to be very careful. There are some people who need assistance. There are people who just kick back, get the welfare, watch TV all day. So they're bringing back on the national level an obligation for work requirements on most adults who receive SNAP or food stamps. And I think it's a good idea up to a point. It depends on what you're going to have them do. My concern is that a welfare recipient is given a job that might otherwise be filled by somebody who would be earning wages or a salary on that job. Now, if you're talking about going on out and cleaning up the streets or something like that, I think that might actually help. But I really do think the United States is an empire in decline. I think it's gone too far to be turned around. I've been trying to turn this country around for almost a quarter of a century now. And I think it's doomed. And I just hope that the U.S. doesn't take the rest of the world with it when it implodes. Now, over in Turkey, as you know, there's been a lot of talk about Turkey joining the European Union. Given what's happening in the member states of the European Union, I think that would be a mistake. But at this point, the EU is now saying they're not sure they want Turkey to join, mostly because of Erdogan's being a loose cannon on deck regarding all these wars that are going on. So that deal may be off. Out in California, more and more cities are coming on board, joining this Trump lawsuit against the state government. And so all of a sudden, this opposition to the illegal immigrant sanctuary status, it's really beginning to spread. And people, they're just sick and tired of the crowding. They're sick and tired of the crime. They're sick and tired of the huge costs of supporting these people. So they're all getting on board. And of course, the open borders people are out there screaming, oh, you're being a racist again. No, we're not being racist. Illegal isn't a race. All right, we're coming up here on another commercial break, and we'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And just now on Fox News, they had a lower third. FBI warns of Russian cyber attack. And this has actually been all over the place. We're getting it from Britain. We're getting it from all of the usual propaganda outfits. And it may be that the war powers are so desperate to silence the independent media, they're going to launch a massive hacking DDoS campaign against us all, which, if you think about it, wouldn't make any sense because we're the ones who are out here, like Russia, trying to avoid a war. But then the U.S. government doesn't believe they have to make any sense. We're the government. Just do what we say, and all will be well. Over in North Carolina, there is, or was a gun range, the Triad Active Shooters Club, outside Greensboro, Winston-Salem. And apparently it has burned down in what is very obviously a case of arson. So the gun grabbers are now out there basically burning places down here. Now, as you know, back when David Hogue was out there being the darling of the media, he called for a boycott of Laura Ingraham because Laura Ingraham had basically said some negative things about him, which were true, and she has a right to report them. And so David went on out there and said, we're boycotting against her advertisers. And some of the advertisers did jump ship at the slightest threat of bad publicity. Some of the advertisers, like MyPillow, stuck with Laura. Fox News stood behind her. And it turns out like Hogue's boycott really didn't do anything. The Ingraham Angle was the leading cable news show in its time slot, averaging 2.69 million viewers throughout the week. The Last Word with Lawrence O'Donnell came in with 2.6 million viewers. Now, there's a little hidden message in there. There are 300 million people in the United States of America, and the top-rated show only gets 2.69 million of those. You can do the math for yourself. The corporate media has lost its audience. And that's why they're so angry with us. We just spoiled it all for them. Okay. Now then, let's talk about Winter Storm Xanto. It's finally starting to fade, but it was a mess over the weekend. It was closing Twin Cities schools. Again, schools were closed today. Hundreds of thousands are still without electricity. And there are 3 deaths now attributed to this storm. One from a vehicular accident. Actually, 2 vehicular accidents and 1 guy who suffered a heart attack while shoveling the snow. This storm has broken all April snowfall records. And I can already see the email I'm going to get. It's just weather. It's just weather. It's no big deal. But you need to remember the context of all of this, and that is how Al Gore and all the carbon Nazis back in 2000 were insisting that because of human-caused global warming, that snowfalls were now a thing of the past. And it just didn't work out that way, did it? All right, now, it's snowing in Des Moines heavily. Apparently the blizzard Xanto slammed into Minnesota. They got a record snowfall. Gosh darn that human-caused global warming. Okay. All right, now then. Apparently over at Boreal Mountain Resort, they're enjoying, in a late season, skiers and snowboarders are out there. They're having a lot of fun. So, again, I think it's pretty obvious at this point, the global warming was a huge money-making hoax. And they're trying to rebrand and say, well, it's climate disruption. And they're still pulling out that old one about how global warming results in colder winters, which that's the shark right there. And let's see. Spring storm brings low snow to Sierra. Apparently, it's snowed in Africa. And over here in WCAX is reporting their snow all over there as well. So it's out there. And they lied to us. There's no other way to put it. They lied to us to get our obedience and our money. That's what they did. Now, interestingly enough, over at Fox 17, they have a weatherman, Gary Frank, who was being basically chastised by fans for just always talking about cold weather. And he came on out and finally said, what do you want me to do, lie to you? That's Al Gore's job. We're going to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Now, we were talking about how long it takes to clean up contaminated sites, which underscores the fact that this claim that the reason they're not finding chemical weapons in Duma is Moscow tampered with the site. It's an utterly ridiculous lie on the face of it here. We were talking about Fukushima cleanup. Hanford is another one. The Hanford Nuclear Reservation. It's a huge, huge chunk of land out in the American West, up into Washington State, Oregon. And they're trying to clean it up there. The place has been around for 70 years. They were making portions of the atomic bomb dropped on Nagasaki. And apparently, as workers tear down buildings to basically demolish them, the workers are being exposed to intensive radiation. And they're now finding radiation 10 miles away from the Hanford Nuclear Reservation as demolition work is halted after the contamination of the workers. I feel really sorry for all those people downstream from Hanford. The government just hasn't really cared about them at all. You know, one of the things I discovered is I was trying to do some research on cancer. It's actually very hard to find any detailed maps of where people are getting cancer. I tried to do it for here in Hawaii a while back, and there was basically a map showing the rates on the individual islands, which did vary, but trying to track it down to specific neighborhoods, cannot find the maps. They're just not out there. And it makes us wonder if maybe there are known causes of cancer in our infrastructure. High-powered radio transmitters, exposure to certain chemicals, and they don't want people looking at those maps. Certainly the realtors don't want people looking at those maps and deciding they don't want to buy a home in this brand new development sitting over a nuclear landfill. Okay, story coming out of the Hacker News. Cyber criminals are hijacking routers' DNS to distribute an Android banking Trojan. It's called Roaming Mantis. And what they're able to do is to go into your router, and most routers have their own internal DNS tables to speed things up. And so the hackers will go into your router, they'll load up the DNS table with phony IPs going to look-alike malware sites. You'll think you'll be going to CNN, you're going to a website that's copied from CNN, but it loads malware. And this is why, if you have a router, change its default password. It's one of the biggest mistakes you can make in securing your home computer and your home network, is to not change that default password. All righty, we've got a caller on the line, Thomas in Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello. Thank you for having me on. I heard you talking about the missing money from the Pentagon, and I've heard Catherine Austin Fitz give quite an account of what seems to be going on, as well as that guy, Dr. Mark Skidmore, out of Michigan State. Apparently, he was a disbeliever. He thought she was just some kind of a... She just couldn't believe it, so then he checked it out himself, and apparently that's his line of education. And he said, darn, she's right.
Yep.
And I just wanted to add that apparently for a period of time during possibly this theft, I mean, the comptroller of the Pentagon was Rabbi Dov Zakheim.
Yes.
And if you look at his family lineage, there's a thing I saw on Rents. His grandfather, over in Europe there, apparently married one of the relatives of Karl Marx. And his father was involved, and actually his grandfather, I think, was involved in the Bolshevik Revolution.
Yes.
Amazing, huh?
Yep.
Small family.
Yep.
That's all I have.
All right. Thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go. Well, apparently Great Britain is already out there saying that if Russia launches a cyber attack on Great Britain is prepared for a retaliatory cyber attack. And no, Russia is not going to launch a cyber attack, certainly not against the independent media. But again, they're just looking for any reason to get people to hate Russia. And we talked before about the possibility of a virtual 9/11. Where the internet is taken down, it causes tremendous harm to businesses, it breaks our lines of communication, forces us to be dependent on broadcast TV for our news, and again, blame it on somebody like Iran or North Korea or Russia, because the government does have a major problem. They can't lie to the public with impunity. Every time the government comes out with another lie, it can be clocked, with an egg timer, how long it's going to be believed. Like that one about how the reason there's no contamination at that Duma site is Russia has tampered with it. So I'm feeling a sense of desperation coming on out. And desperate people take desperate chances, and they do desperately stupid things. All right, let's go back to the phones. Roxanne in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello?
Roxanne, are you there?
Yes, okay. I just wanted to kind of fill some people, everybody in on, who are the three groups, especially in Syria with this all these years, is to get this message out that Assad is gassing his people. they would be the White Helmets, okay? That's a UK intelligence group that runs that. Number 2 would be Syrian American Medical Society. That's funded out of here by the Muslim Brotherhood. And then the BDC, that's Violations Documentation Center. And we know that Ayman Asafari and Soros fund that.
Yes.
So there you go. Oh, and by the way, the White Helmets, you know, they're all worried about these children and everything. They took off for Idlib, so they're over there now. That's the next false flag. Have a good evening.
All right, thanks an awful lot. Well, I think they took off for Idlib because that neighborhood near Damascus, Duma, has been cleaned out. And it's almost like the claim that there was a chemical attack was sort of a parting gift, so that the U.S. would come on in and act like ISIS air support yet one more time. Okay, apparently Mark Zuckerberg has admitted Facebook is subjective in how they manipulate their algorithms to censor conservatives, which we knew all along. The censorship is not just of bad words and pictures of naked people or attacks on gays or anything like that. It's politically motivated filtering, which is why everybody needs to get off of Facebook right now. We're going to take another phone call from Fred in Michigan. Aloha, Fred. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Hope paradise is smiling your way today.
It's a little cloudy. Other than that, we're fine.
And I hope Fukushima fallout isn't a big deal. Someday you'll have to give us your, your astute analysis of that.
Okay.
Hey, Mike, have you ever heard of Operation Talpiot? Talpiot?
Yes, I have.
Because I saw a YouTube vid called Israel's Secret Weapon, the Talpiot program. Blew me away, man. Blew me away. Israel's Secret Weapon, the Talpiot program. And also another one, Russia taking over Middle East. Russia taking over Middle East, protecting Israel. And then I saw another one, man. This was astonishing equally. It's called Evidence. Israel did 9/11. Trump approves. Evidence. Israel did 9/11. Trump approves. And I thought, whoa.
That's a bit of a stretch.
You know what, man?
That's a bit of a stretch.
Yeah,
and so's the one about Russia taking over the Middle East, because we know from General Wesley Clark that was the U.S. agenda.
Yeah, well, I think it's a sophisticated soap opera psyops in many ways. And if it's not, there is this YouTube channel, Press for Truth. Press for Truth. This kind of blew me away. I didn't know that there was this thing called Genie Oil and Gas, like G-E-N-I-E, Genie Oil and Gas.
Yes.
Syrian war, Golan Heights. Well, it so happens that these guys at Press for Truth, they divulge the names of the board of directors of Genie Oil and Gas. It looks like they're all, PNAC, former PNAC folks. And it's in direct competition with a Russian, Syrian, Iranian oil and gas pipeline project.
Yes.
I don't know, man. It's crazy. It is absolutely crazy over
Dick
there,
Cheney's
right?
on the board of directors of Genie.
Thank you. And there's others too, and they're all dual Israeli. I suspect Genie is dual Israeli. And what do you want to bet? They're all kissing cousins. I think they're all kissing cousins. And that thing, that documentary about Trump and Bibi Netanyahu, they each wrote books. Netanyahu is Terrorism, How the West Can Win. And I think Trump's book was America, the Country We Deserve, or something like that. And it shows you Trump's word-for-word response to 9/11 when he was questioned about the structural integrity. He said, there's no way planes are going to penetrate the building. The gas can't burn hot enough, yada, yada. And then a few days later, he says, yeah, you know, when you get a group of people that are hell-bent on terrorism and destruction, anything can happen.
Well, so he was compromised even back then.
Oh,
Anyway,
man, you got to see it, Brooke. You got to see it.
Fred,
you know, I
Fred, I'm sorry to cut you off.
Okay,
We've got some breaking news here
Right.
I need to get to, so thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. All right, apparently there is another missile attack taking place over Syria right now. According to SANA, the sirens are sounding, and it looks like there's another missile attack targeting Shayrat Air Base in Homs Province. No more details other than that, but it looks like the missile strikes are back on. I'm just so disgusted with this government here. Alrighty, we all know about Amazon. They sell all kinds of interesting things. Apparently over in Great Britain, Amazon UK has been forced to pull child sex dolls from their online storefront after widespread complaints from a watchdog group. And apparently the concern was that pedophiles might use them as a gateway doll, which would lead them to the sexual abuse of real children. My question is, why does Amazon even have this sort of thing in the first place? And I know they got a lot of interesting stuff out there in Amazon, and there's a lot of kinky stuff, but I have to side with the critics on this one. That was wholly inappropriate. It was wholly inappropriate. Story coming on out of the Daily Mail. Top medical journals accused of skewing research by raking in millions of dollars in bribes from drug firms. And it's basically talking about the fact that these so-called professional peer-reviewed medical journals have been shifting the articles, rewriting them, and they get millions of dollars from the pharmaceutical companies. And obviously that calls the reliability and the honesty and accuracy of those journals into question. Now, journals profiting the most from this cozy relationship with drug firms included the Journal for the American Medical Association, which gets 52% of its revenue from printing studies by pharmaceutical companies that obviously favor their product, and the Journal for the American College of Cardiology, whose 35 editors rake in an estimated $15 million from companies every single year. So it's all about the money. It's not about quality medical care. It's about pushing product. Now, a lot of people are very upset over this approval for the mega merger of Bayer and Monsanto. And these are two companies with very, very lousy reputations. Of course, we all know about Monsanto and glyphosate and their attempt to force GMO seeds on the entire planet. Bayer is notorious for having used tainted blood from prisoners to create a hemophilia drug that turned out to be infected with AIDS. And rather than destroy it, Bayer simply chose to sell it in other countries where there were no laws governing AIDS-contaminated blood products. So these are two of the worst companies about to become the biggest, worst company of all. Now, if you're over in East Africa, you know that there is this rift. You can see it very clearly on Google Earth, and apparently it is starting to move. Apparently this rift made a sudden appearance in southwestern Kenya and suggests that the eastern part of Africa is starting to pull away and form its own new continent. Of course, it's going to take, you know, tens of thousands, if not millions of years, but it is interesting to start to see this happen. Over in Balikpapan, which is an Indonesian port city, they've declared a state of emergency after there was a fracture in a pipeline that caused a devastating oil spill along the coast, killing 5 fishermen and bringing health problems to hundreds of locals. Apparently, it ignited, and it's covering an area of around 18 square kilometers, or 7 square miles, contaminating the sea and polluting the air with thick black smoke. And one protected dugong is already washed up dead on the shore. The 5 fishermen died after being caught up in the fire caused by the spill. We're going to take a break for commercials. Back with the last segment of our program after these few words.
All right, so I'm doing this over the phone. We just lost the computer that we do the Twitch on. I'm going to have to replace that now. More news coming in about that attack on Syria. Apparently, Israeli warplanes are attacking Damascus. Syria is trying to fight back. So the caller we had earlier in the show was absolutely right. This is not over. It's not going anywhere. And it's a rough time. This is a very, very dangerous time, and a lot of people have been going to sleep at night dreaming of mushroom clouds out the window. So the issue is going to be, at some point, when does Syria really react to all these provocations? When does Russia react to all the provocations? This is not a new Cold War. This is a hot war that they're moving toward. That report that Donald Trump wanted to bomb Iranian and Russian assets last Friday is very, very scary. And he actually thinks we can win a war against Russia and China. And I disagree. I don't think that we can. And any war that we have will be costly on both sides. So it's a very, very dangerous situation indeed. Okay, anyway, down in Australia, apparently they've got a major brush fire that is on its way towards a nuclear reactor. And there doesn't seem to be any way to stop it. It's just outside of Sydney, and they're obviously very, very concerned. Okay, I'm hearing something in the background. Anyway, by the way, speaking of the Navy scandals here, apparently a Navy chaplain has been fired after he was caught on video having sex in the parking lot of a New Orleans bar. So there's a good one right there. All right, we're coming up here on the top of the show. Stay tuned for John Stadmiller, and hopefully we'll have our technical issues worked out by tomorrow. So have a good day. Aloha, America.